Welcome back to the Team Hybrid Racing YouTube channel. Behind me is my recently acquired Acura TSX. It's a 2006 with a 2.4 K series motor in it. When I went to go look at this car, there was a bit of a noise coming from under the hood. The previous owner thought maybe it was a power steering pump. And when I got home, unfortunately on the dash, I got this light. So upon further inspection, I got out my multimeter, checked the battery, checked it when it was running, and I was getting pretty much no output from the alternator. I also checked a plug on the alternator, which I'll show you here shortly in the video, to see if the alternator was even just getting signal out to it. And unfortunately, it was. So I guess fortunately that was good that it was, but it pretty much told me that the alternator was bad. So what we're going to do is go ahead and pull the alternator off this car, take it, go get it replaced, get a new alternator, and put that on. So I'll walk you guys through the steps on that. It should be a pretty easy process, but let's take a look. So I have all the tools that you'll need for this job laid out on front here. So you'll definitely need a 14 millimeter and then another larger wrench. This is 3/4, grab a 17, anything other. This is just going to be used for leverage. I've got a ratchet here, the short extension, and a 12 millimeter socket. I've got a swivel here. It's not necessary, but I think it does make it a little easier to get to the bottom bolts on the alternator, so that's a 12 also. This is just a standard 12 wrench, a ratcheting 12 wrench, and then a ratcheting 10 millimeter. So step one, you're going to want to start by taking off the negative battery terminal. This is actually not a factory terminal, so your size may vary. I think on mine this is a 12 or 13, but anyhow, you're going to want to unbolt that and set the negative terminal connector off to the side, so that way your battery is not connected during this. We don't want to arc anything and potentially blow a fuse or something like that. So now we're going to move over here, and you'll quickly notice it's a very clean alternator. Truth be told, I'm kind of filming this backwards because I didn't really think about it beforehand. But step one, before we get started on that, you can do one of two things. Disconnect this green connector. There's just a little push lock right here. Squeeze that in, and that just pops right off, just like that. So put that back on. And then further down in here, remove this rubber boot, like so. And that exposes the terminal post with a 10 millimeter nut on that. So you'll want to take that off. And at that point, you can take this little harness and kind of just move it out of the way. So pop that back on. Okay, so that's the two connections as far as wiring goes to the alternator. The next step, I found it easier to go ahead and, well, first we want to take the tensioner off. So let me grab my light real quick. Kind of hard to see. So there's the tensioner, and you'll notice the bolt in the center, that's the 14. So what we want to do for that, and let me see if I can set up my light so we can see it easily. It's not too bad. So you want to grab a 14 wrench, set that on there, and like I said, grab a bigger wrench, 3/4, whatever. Do the old leverage trick, and you're actually going to pull this towards you. So let me flip this around. It's incredibly hard to do with one hand. I dropped the wrench. Anyhow, you'll pull that towards you, and that'll loosen up the belt, and you can slip it off, everything from here. From there, I find it easier to access the alternator and getting the alternator out by removing the power steering pump. There's one 12 millimeter bolt on top, and then we might be able to see, it's probably easier to see from here. There's one 12 millimeter bolt on the bottom, right where my light is shining. If you take those two off, I just use a ratcheting 12 there, socket 12. You might be able to use a ratcheting 12 on that. And then you can just take the pump, slide it over out of the way. From there, once that's all out of the way, it's pretty simple. We've got a 12 up here. You can use a ratchet or a socket. And then there are two on the bottom. They're kind of difficult to see, but there's one right underneath here and one right over here in front of this hose. And when you see the alternator off the car, it's a little bit more obvious, especially when we go to put it back on. So you want to take both of those out. The top one is easy. This bottom one, I used this wobble socket kind of coming in from this angle. The other one actually just took a standard 12 wrench down here, cracked it loose, and once they're loose, it's pretty easy to just take them out by hand. And at that point, then you can kind of just pull the alternator out. So I just pulled the alternator off of the Acura here, 2.4 liter, and this thing is not happy. Really doesn't want to spin. You can feel resistance in it, and it's making noise. I don't know if this is picking up the noise, but definitely should spin a lot more freely. And also, something broke off inside of it. You can hear it rattling around. So, get a replacement for this guy, and then I'll show you guys how to put this back on. Pretty easy, but I'll show you that next. So as you can see now, we've got everything out of the car, and I've got the fresh alternator right here. So we'll go ahead and put this on. As you saw before, we've got one bolt on the top, two on the bottom, the connector, and then of course where your positive battery terminal goes. So we'll go ahead and start putting this on, and should be pretty easy. So I'll go ahead and start with the top bolt, and that way kind of holds itself in place. And I gotta wiggle this back in to how we had it before. Gotta remember how I pulled that out. It should just slide in here. Having the power steering pump slightly out of the way does help. Should help. It's not too bad. There's probably a perfect way to do this, but we'll get her. There we go. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to take the top bolt and start that one just to kind of hold it in place for us. And it's pretty easy to get to, so just go ahead and thread that one in by hand. That way the alternator stays in place. And then we've got the two smaller bolts that sit down on the bottom. These are a little more difficult to see. Let me grab my light. Let's see if we can get these started. I'm going to start with the outer one because there's a little more room here. Help line everything up. There we go. Okay. I got one of them. Let's top one a little more. Here we go. So those are just 12mm bolts. I'll try to snug this one up a little bit. Okay, I've got the top one snugged down. Not quite hand tight. The bottom left one's not too bad, but the bottom right bolt is a little tricky to get started. So again, it's just the 3 bolts. There's one on top, which is the longer bolt, and then the 2 shorter bolts on the bottom. Okay. So go ahead and tighten this one up. Now I just do hand tight on these. The bottom left, I think we had our best luck with the swivel coming at it from the side. So we'll try that again. There we go. All right, get that one nice and snug. Okay. And then this other side, get the wires out of the way. So on this one, I'm just using a ratcheting 12. There's not a lot of room to get a socket in there. And there's just enough room to get this wrench in here. Okay. We'll double check this top one, and it's good. Okay, so we that's all three of those. This is the connector I was talking about from before. You can see that. It's green connector. There is a black wire with a yellow stripe. That's where I checked for voltage with key on when I tested this to make sure that the alternator was even getting a signal to turn on. So from here, we'll go ahead and connect the main stud. This should be, as long as it's the same as the nut that came off of here, a 10. Which looks like that is the case. So go ahead and slide this back on here. Just a ring terminal. There's a rubber boot that shields it from making any contact. So slide that over first, of course. Put this nut back on here and we'll tighten this up. Snug that in by hand, and then you can get a ratchet on there, ratcheting wrench. You don't have to go crazy with it. Make sure it's snug. Perfect. Okay. And then you just plug this connector back in. It only goes on one way. Wait for it to click. Okay. So at that point, the alternator is installed, the battery wire's on, the connector's on. I'll bring you guys around and show you that real quick. There's a quick view. You can see the stud post and the connector. There's the top bolt and then the two underneath. And so we'll want to make sure we put this boot. It just slides over and covers the stud. Okay. So from there, we'll go ahead and remount the power steering pump, which is just the two bolts. We took that out to get out of the way to get the alternator up. And again, as I said, disregard the reservoir. That was previous owner didn't have an OE replacement, had that, so they put that on, but I've got a new bottle, so we'll be replacing that. But for now, we're going to go ahead and put the power steering pump back on, two bolts, and then reinstall the belt. So let's do that. Two bolts for the power steering pump are also 12 millimeters. Again, as mentioning, don't drop them down into there. Super easy. We'll go ahead and put the top one in. Get it started by hand. And then just underneath on the bottom, you can reach it from the front here. The second one, we'll start that by hand as well. Once those are both hand tight, and if I have electric impacts, I have air out here, and I'm sitting here doing this all by hand, but hey, nothing wrong with that. So snug these up, 12 millimeter, tight. Grab this one with the socket because that high pressure line is kind of in the way. Okay. Then our last step is to put the belt back on. Now hopefully when I took the belt off it didn't get too far out of its range. But we'll slide it over the alternator first. This car looks like it doesn't need a new belt, but obviously if your belt is worn, now would be the time to do that. All right, at this point, I got the belt back on there around everything except for the alternator. So take your 14 again, put it on the bolt. I like to use just a 17 or some other bigger wrench. Actually, it's 3/4. Pull it towards yourself. That will take tension off the belt. At that point, you should have enough room, hopefully, to slide it over. And there we go. Put that slack back and we're all set. So at this point, we'll go ahead and put the negative battery terminal back on and start it up, and let's see if that message is gone, and we'll also get the voltmeter out and double check that we are getting proper voltage when the car is running. And just real quick to show, you get your tensioner, power steering pump, alternator that we replaced, water pumps down at the bottom, you got your crank pulley there on the bottom left, and then of course the AC compressor at the very bottom. So just to kind of show you a quick routing how that works. So let's jump in and see if we no longer get that message. Well, the battery light's not on. Usually it would take a second to pop up, but I think we might be okay. Yeah, looks good. One thing I did mention is I don't have a battery saver or anything, so I do have to enter the codes. I believe it's in the owner's book that I have, so we'll get that set up. But otherwise, looks like we're good here. So let's go ahead and check to see what kind of voltage we have at the battery. Should be good, but let's just do a double check. All right, so we'll get our multimeter out, get it set to voltage. All we're gonna do is look to see what kind of voltage we're getting. Perfect. We're getting 14 over 14 volts now. And before, with it running, it was sitting at like 11.8 or 12 with a full battery. So now we know we've got a good alternator. So that checked out. All right, so hopefully maybe anybody who was looking for some quick advice as to how to remove the alternator, check the alternator, maybe you got that check charging system light. Hopefully that kind of made sense. Sorry that the video was a little backwards as far as what I did and didn't do in the order of operations, but hopefully I laid out the tools that you need, a quick how-to, and then showing you how to put it back in, install it, and check everything out afterwards. So thanks for watching. Quick little easy video. I'm not sure if I'll do anything else to this car, although tinkering with cars is kind of what I do, so who knows. Maybe I'll do some other stuff with this, but for now, just a quick little video. It's winter. There's not a lot to do. My race car is not here. It's in another state. So just trying to find stuff to put out there. So hopefully maybe as long as one person got something out of this, I guess it did its job. So thanks a lot. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Comment below. What do you want me to see? What would you guys want me to do this car? I probably won't, because I don't want to put money into this car that can't go into my other car. But hey, who knows? Maybe there's some cool stuff that I don't know. And yeah, so thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.